This is Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Welcome to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. We are your perpetuation of progressive talk entitlement, and we hope everybody out there is having a great day. Got a big show in store for you guys today. Nicole Flato, the justice editor over at Think Progress blog. Lee Camp, comedian, activist, author, and host of the Moment of Clarity podcast. And perhaps one more surprise guest, if we should be so lucky. As usual, we like to start off with the news that you may have missed or we think deserves a little bit more attention. Starting with any and all news, Charlie Rangel.
Charlie Rangel.
Just because we love to say that name. Charlie Rangel and Mark Pocan. I'm getting my Congress mixed with my Southern Poverty Law Center there. Announced this week that they will sponsor a bill to correct the records of any armed service members who were discharged for their sexual orientation. If they were discharged dishonorably under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, their records will be corrected to give them an honorable discharge listing instead. And this actually has a much larger effect than just whether or not the military approves of your lifestyle. Because of a dishonorable discharge, gay and lesbian service members can be blocked from voting.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yes. Blocked from receiving unemployment benefits, getting any benefits under the GI Bill, getting any veterans benefits or health services from the VA. They can't get VA disability benefits. They can't even get ceremonial burial rights at military cemeteries.
Wow.
Yeah. So all because of their sexual orientation, they could
and
be...
a lousy policy.
Right. Yeah. But they could be discriminated against.
Let's not blame the orientation. Let's blame how they treated the orientation.
Excellent point. Excellent point. It's estimated that 114,000 members, former members of the U.S. Armed Services, were kicked out for being gay or lesbian. And so Charlie Rangel and Mark Pocan are working on this. Finally, we have, the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. So these two gentlemen are going back and trying to undo some of the damage that horrible...
Are they reporting at all on the likelihood of the success of this? It just seems like one of those things that's going to get all bogged down in the same debate that the Republicans would like to have about... Because there are Republicans... I mean, I think Paul Ryan ran on bringing Don't Ask, Don't Tell back.
Yeah.
The Republicans are pretty ticked off that is gone as it is. I don't know if they're going to throw out, well, it'll cost too much or blah, blah, blah.
There's no indication. They haven't introduced the bill yet. They've just announced they're going to sponsor it.
And you will have the crazy ones saying, well, they did actually break military rules, so therefore, the technicality ones, the whatever.
Right.
The debate itself, I would question whether or not... I'm all for it being brought up, and it's an important debate to be had.
Yes.
I just hope it gets somewhere.
I do too. I mean, especially with our broken Congress as it is, it's so hard for any bills to get anywhere. And we're going to get into that a few times throughout the show. But it's just nice to see that somebody out there is trying to say, it's great that we repealed Don't Ask, Don't Tell, but while that law was in place, while that policy was in place, it really hurt 114,000 people.
Sure.
And it's time to start undoing some of that
Charlie
damage.
Rangel's a Korean War vet?
Yes.
I believe.
Yes, it is.
And these are things I didn't realize that, what those dishonorable discharges do in terms of benefits.
Yes. I didn't have any idea until I read this article. I mean, blocked from voting?
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. Can't collect
Treated
unemployment.
like a criminal, essentially.
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly.
Hell, in some states, ex-felons can vote. So.
Yes.
Worse than a criminal.
Yes.
Terrible.
So good news. We'll have to keep an eye on that. Hopefully they get that legislation written and introduced, and hopefully Republicans don't obstruct such a common sense bill to just pay some respect to people who gave their time and their lives to our armed forces. So in other news, Keystone XL pipeline owner, TransCanada, they think the protesters should be treated like terrorists.
Yeah.
this, I think, really needs to get some more attention because this is an ongoing theme. We spoke with Josh Idelson a week or two ago of The Nation about how Walmart had gotten what's the word I'm looking for?
Restraining
Thank
orders.
you. Restraining orders against protesters. Shell recently got restraining orders against protesters from Arctic drilling. And TransCanada wants to go even a step farther and say protesters should be prosecuted under state and federal terrorist laws. This is, actively using our court system, actively influencing our police departments, our justice system to crush dissent, to say that you don't have a right to protest these huge corporations that have profound impact on our lives without being treated like a terrorist.
It's pretty amazing that you have corporations who are not people who want all the speech they can buy, but if you disagree with us, you can't talk at all, otherwise you're going to prison.
Right.
It's amazing that peaceful dissent. Now I realize that I don't like the vandalism part. Not a big fan, but protesting, the peaceful sit-ins, those types of things, I understand you can arresting for trespass. That is part of our tradition.
Even if you get arrested for vandalism, then be charged as vandalism.
That's part of our tradition of opposition and protest in our country. But terrorism?
Right.
Come on.
Right. Well, I mean, just think, though, at what considering these people to be terrorists. Think of the expanded police powers that gives law enforcement agencies of spying. I mean, there's been all this discussion in recent weeks of the NSA. Well, if your protesters are considered terrorists,
there goes all your metadata. Boom, there goes your Google accounts. Boom.
Right.
They have all your information and your friends' friends and your friends of friends and friends of friends of friends.
Right.
Who are you talking about? You talking about tractors up in Montana? Uh-oh, you're a terrorist.
Yeah.
Wow.
Apparently, a group called Bold Nebraska, who is protesting the Keystone XL pipeline, found this information through a Freedom of Information Act.
So what is the corporations are going to the governmental authorities and saying, "Hey, we read this statute about terrorism. Why don't you use that?"
That's exactly what they're doing. They're actually providing an entire presentation to local and state law enforcement agencies explaining, giving the worst examples of what protesters have done and explaining how those crimes could be prosecuted under terrorism statutes. Now, of course, TransCanada said they were just sharing the information with law enforcement agencies, not directing them how to do their jobs.
Yeah, we weren't telling what to do. We were just giving them some advice.
Right. But I'm sorry, do those protesters get their chance to provide a presentation to the police department?
Probably not.
Exactly.
I don't think they have the funds to come up with the PowerPoints and pay for the attorneys.
Yeah. In addition to just limiting our First Amendment right to protest, this is also very dangerous in which powers it gives police agencies, what laws, the type of sentencing that protesters can receive for small crimes.
It's a chilling effect on dissent.
Yeah.
Which, and then it goes right back to speech. There's the protected, really expensive speech, and then there's the rest of us who don't even get to talk at all.
Well,
down to free speech zones.
Corporations don't want to just buy free speech. They want to buy your right to free speech as well.
Right.
Yeah. So.
And they can afford it seems, lately.
Apparently, especially TransCanada. Although you'd think that they would be really tied up, some funds would be tied up dealing with that big spill in Alberta, Canada. But hey, maybe they have a lot of extra lying around. I can't believe I just read that news. Monsanto has been given the World Food Prize. Yes, Monsanto. The prize supposedly recognizes people who improve the, quote, quality, quantity, or availability of food in the world. It comes with a huge honor, which can be used to, for public relations and press, and a $250,000 cash prize. I'm sure you would be completely surprised to know that Monsanto itself gave the organization that decides the winner a $5 million pledge back in 2008. I'm sure that's just a coincidence.
So, in other words, that's like getting an A rating from the Better Business Bureau or an A+ rating on your bunch of worthless mortgages when you pay off Standard & Poor's.
It
Or
actually, yes.
when you're packing the FDA with all of your buddies in order to get your drug approved, it's you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, and it's all just a PR cycle.
Right. Theoretically, Monsanto got the prize for their genetically modified crops, which supposedly increase crop yield throughout the world because they can resist insects, disease, and extremes of climate change. However, there's still a lot of debate on all of those positions, and
And certainly the quality.
exactly that's exactly where I was going to go. There's if this award is supposed to be, for quality, quantity, or availability, availability and quantity are pretty much still in debate. Quality is specifically being questioned.
Right. But also, should you get an award for making available in mass quantities food that will kill you or is very bad and detrimental to your health?
Yeah, I think that seems counterintuitive.
Right. I think that this is not an either or. There has to be at least the same quantity, the same quality and more quantity, but certainly not lower quality and whole bunches of it.
Right.
That is the situation where we seem to be in with this company.
Right. So Robert T. Fraley, he's one of the Monsanto's executive vice president, and he's the chief technology officer. He was one of the original scientists who actually developed the ability to genetically modify crops. He's the one who specifically got the award, but of course it is de facto granted to Monsanto. So just in case you weren't infuriated enough by, say, the Monsanto Protection Act and
Seriously,
Oregon.
You have the Supreme Court patting them on the back. You have Congress saying, hey, don't worry about it. And then a world organization saying, great food.
Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah. As I said, I can't believe I just read that news.
But then, of course, when genetically modified wheat gets shipped to Asia, they say, we're not going to buy it anymore. And Europe is saying, we're not going to take it either. So, there is some progress.
Yeah, how does that factor into
progress.
availability?
The institutions seem to be all in bed with one another and patting each other on the back. But when it comes to the people who actually are the consumers of this, you have states upon states talking about finally, labeling this, especially up in the Northeast. So there is progress going on.
Yeah, but how does it affect the availability when certain countries won't even accept genetically modified products
right.
into
and
their...
It may be higher crop yields, but the price is significantly higher because they have
Good
a monopoly on these types of seeds.
Good
as we
point.
saw with the Supreme Court case.
Yes. So, in some good food-related news, New York is starting an amazing new composting program, a food recycling program. And this is something that so many of us have been saying for years. Why are we not capturing all that methane gas that's released at garbage dumps? We're just letting energy completely disappear into the atmosphere. And at the same time, methane is one of the...
And it stinks up all the highways in New Jersey.
Yes. But it's also one of the most damaging gases to our atmosphere. So to combat, two issues at once, New York is starting a food recycling program. It will start off by recycling 100 tons of food each year. However, that is only 1/10 of all of the food garbage that New Yorkers create every year. It's going to be a voluntary program to start off with. It's going to include 150,000 homes, 600 schools, and 100 high-rise buildings. They're going to collect all the food garbage, compost it, and turn it into biogas, which in turn will help the city save money on its electric bill. I think this is really cool. And it's also going to save New Yorkers money in how much it costs them to just throw away their garbage every year. They spend about $2 billion just throwing away garbage every year because they have to export it to other areas. It's not like there's a big trash dump in the middle of New York City. You look like that's debatable.
No, I love New York City.
Yes, I know you do.
I just had, there's the stereotypical mob connections. I wonder how this all works out too, because cutting into the $2 billion.
Yeah. Well, these type of programs have been started in like local communities and even a few states throughout the country, but it's kind of been viewed as, the hippies over there in their compost. So they're hoping that a major city like New York doing
it's good for hippies and totalitarians like Michael Bloomberg.
Well said. Well said. He can use that $2 billion to steal more money out of New York Union City pensions. I'll just stop there while I'm ahead.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just stay with the guns and just lay off the rest.
Yes. But it's good news. It's great news for our environment, for energy consumption and conservation. And it's, good news to start new habits and show that those habits, green energy and conservation is not just good science. It's not just good for our environment. It's good business. I mean, this is going to save New Yorkers $2 billion a year. That's big, big money in terms of a city, even a city the size of New York City. So,
yeah, well, let's probably not say that it's going to save them $2 billion. They spend $2 billion total
yes,
a year.
excuse me.
They're going to wipe it out. So,
Yes.
and there is some cost to doing the whole process, but
Yes.
overall, it is good business over time. It's just as it with any technology, any business, that initial seed, for example, the first pill of a certain pharmaceutical that has revolutionized the world, first polio vaccine, cost a lot of money to come up with, but thereafter, so what we're dealing with is we're investing the money in the first parts of many of these green technologies. So it takes the leadership of a major city like New York to say, let's try it, let's make the investment, and then over time, that money will come back and the benefits of the planet. So that's, I don't much care how much money it saves, because when it comes right down to it, the cost of carbon is not just the cost of the fuel at the pump.
Right.
The cost of carbon, all the externalities, and they're not actually playing on an equal playing field.
Right.
As it is right now. So when you say these, a lot of people say that these green technologies are so expensive compared to natural gas.
Yeah, I mean, if we were subsidizing green technology the way we subsidize big oil, it'd probably be free.
Or if actually the costs that big oil actually impacts all
Right.
those other things that it causes, if that cost was already factored in, it would be more expensive.
Right.
Because for a society, it is more expensive.
And we're going to talk about one way a certain state is dealing with that a little later in the show.
Cool.
And in big news, of course, the past few weeks we have been talking endlessly, as has every news show, political show, about the NSA scandal, about government surveillance. Well, this week we got one more big news bomb regarding drones, that the FBI admitted to using surveillance drones. This is a big deal. I mean, many of us have had big qualms with drone technology in and of itself, the fact that it's used to, kill people throughout the world. Well, the FBI says they've only used it in a very, very minimal way, very seldom. Do you believe that?
Yes, and I don't. I got to say, my hair. I'm not all insane about this. Quite honestly, the FBI has had helicopters for a very long time. These are not drones with bombs on them. They're drones.
They're surveillance drones.
They're surveillance, and we've had surveillance helicopters.
Yes, but you can hear a helicopter. You know it's there.
But I understand that. But they've had technologies similar to them. They've been using them fine. The thing is that so long as they're getting warrants, that's all I care.
They're not. Nobody even knew about this until Robert Mueller admitted it during a hearing about the phone and internet data collection. And they've said, quote, that they might need to look at privacy restrictions. They're only in the initial stages of figuring out how these surveillance drones need to be regulated to protect our privacy. But yet they're already going ahead and using them.
But they're not that much different, I'm sorry, than a helicopter.
I disagree.
Why? What's the difference?
Because drones can be completely smaller. You can have drones the size of a freaking dragonfly. You don't know where that's going. I mean, that could be peering in somebody's windows if the FBI really wanted it to be.
The FBI can go across the street and put binoculars in and peer inside your window.
But they would have to get a warrant
No,
for
they
it.
would not. Absolutely, without a doubt.
Why not?
Because actually not binoculars, but they can go across the street. They can look in your windows because if it's visible from public, they can't come on your property and look in.
But how do you know that they wouldn't be doing that with drones? I think that this acceptance of saying, yes, you can have all this extra technology.
Saying yes. I'm saying that they should be treated like helicopters. Helicopters can fly over. They can look at traffic.
If
they
they're
can
the
look at
size
patterns.
of helicopters and people can recognize that they're there like they would a helicopter, I would agree with that, but I don't.
You can get the airplanes that fly really high. You can't see those. Those have surveillance in them. I think for some reason the word drone has become this warning. Everyone's freaking out about it. I think it should be treated exactly the way every other type of surveillance is supposed to be treated. In that, if it's visible in the public without extra, binoculars, things like that, then it's out in public. All right. If you are going to center in on a certain thing or go above and beyond and use technology above and beyond, meaning honing in just going after one particular backyard, etc., you need a warrant.
But they're using these before even developing privacy guidelines. So
we
do you
have
think
a privacy
for
guideline.
one
It's called the Fourth
instance-
Amendment. Just follow it.
Yeah, because they've obviously been so good at that up until now.
You know what, though? Then every other type of surveillance they do, if you say they're just not going to follow the Fourth Amendment, then that's the issue.
No, the issue is
It's not the drones.
pushing
it's
for
the fact they're not following the
Amendment.
Fourth Amendment.
Right.
So, but why is drones so much different? They're not following it anywhere. We should be
Because
concentrating on
it's
them
just
not. We should be
another-
concentrating on the fact that they're not following the Fourth Amendment rather than what methods they're using.
Because it's just another violation of our privacy. And they're still sitting here defending these programs, saying, if you take away our right to spy on you, we're not going to be able to prevent the next terrorist attack.
Totally
I'm
different.
so sick of that argument.
I understand that, but that's a Fourth Amendment argument. I'm talking about what makes drones different than anything else.
Their ability to spy on people without it's not a helicopter. It's not something, it's equivalent of somebody sitting there and wiretapping your phones, where your privacy can be invaded and you have no way of knowing. And I'm sorry, but if they haven't even developed privacy guidelines, I would not believe for an
We
instant.
have privacy guidelines. They're called the Fourth Amendment.
Right, but they haven't applied them to drones.
Then they got to stop.
Right, exactly.
But not because they're drones, but because of the Fourth Amendment.
It just goes to show how little they respect the Fourth Amendment, in my opinion.
Sure.
So,
And that is what we should be working on. And that is the common thread for all of these.
right.
That is the common thread. What I'm saying is the fact that it's drones, it does not make me crazy. It makes me crazy that on all of these things, the Fourth Amendment is not being respected. That's all I'm saying.
Exactly. And it really concerns me that an entire new technology is being used, just like the data mining, without established, approved, and acknowledged privacy guidelines. I'm sorry. It's not going to stop bothering me. And yes, maybe it's
Don't get me
trigger
wrong,
to the
I'm not
word drone.
what I'm saying.
but I don't care. It's still.
But when you say it's not going to stop bothering you, don't say intimate that it doesn't bother me too. What I'm saying is the drone part doesn't bother me. It's the Fourth Amendment part that they're ignoring that bothers me.
Both bother me. So, anyhow, there's our debate.
Nice way to start the
Yeah,
day.
nice way to start the show.
We both completely agree, but we're going to yell it.
The funny part is that story shows you that there are real scandals going on, scandals the American people care about, and that there is much to be hotly debated about. However, most of Congress is still focused on nonsense scandals, and one Congress member this week tried to put an end to that talking point. We're going to get into that next. You're listening to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Get your blood pumping today, early in the show. We'll be right back here on Talking Left. Stick around.
Hey, this is Hal Sparks from the Hal Sparks radio program Mega Worldwide, and you're listening to Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Okay, astronaut, you're up. You'll be meeting with Wish Kid Brandon.
Roger, Brandon.
His wish is to see a space shuttle launch.
All systems are go. We are clear for liftoff.
This year, more than 27,000 children will be diagnosed with a life-threatening medical condition.
And Cowboy,
Yes, ma'am.
you'll be meeting with Shayla at a dude ranch in San Antonio.
Let's saddle up.
Some will miss school, some will miss time with their family and friends.
Princess, are you here?
Oh, yes. Thank you so much for rescuing me from that evil witch.
Juliana wishes for a princess-themed room makeover.
That sounds magical.
But with your help, the Make-A-Wish Foundation can lift their spirits and give them a special kind of hope.
Pirate,
Yar!
you're up for Isaac's wish.
Aye, aye, Captain.
The wishes of thousands of children are waiting to come true.
You can help make my wish happen. Visit wish.org today.
My name is Joe Thompson. I'm 29 years old and have a career that I love as a systems analyst. Career. It still sounds cool to say that word. I never could have gotten on his path without a college degree. And if the college me were here, he'd tell you.
I never would have gotten to college without Big Brothers Big Sisters. I could have ended up anywhere, on the streets even. But college? Joe Thompson? Not likely. My big brother helped me out. He taught me I could do anything, at a time when a lot of people were saying just the opposite.
And to a 7-year-old, that means a lot.
My big brother's name is Phil. And Phil is the reason that this 7-year-old grows up to be a systems analyst.
Whether you donate money or time, you're helping Big Brothers Big Sisters help a child. And that can last a lifetime. Start something today at BigBrothersBigSisters.org. Brought to you by Big Brothers Big Sisters and the Ad Council.
Hi, this is Brad Friedman, your friendly citizen investigative blogger, journalist, troublemaker, muckraker, and all-around swell fellow from BradBlog.com. Join me for the Bradcast every Wednesday from 3 to 4 p.m. 1 hour of troublemaking and muckraking ripped from the pages of BradBlog.com and sometimes from the dark recesses of my mind. We'll have investigative interviews with newsmakers, we'll call out the liars, frauds, and phonies, and we'll even give kudos to the good guys if we can find any. Stories you won't hear anywhere else. We'll report on politics, elections, election reform, mainstream corporate media failure, media reform, global warming denialism, and everything before, during, and after. Join me for the Bradcast every Wednesday, now a full hour, 3 to 4 p.m., right here on Pacifica Radio's KPFK, and coast to coast and around the globe on kpfk.org.
Hank Action News is proud to be sponsored by Healthcare for America Now. HCAN is a national coalition of more than 1,000 groups in 50 states, representing 30 million people. HCAN works to promote, defend, implement, and improve the Affordable Care Act at both the state and federal levels. They also try to protect Medicare and Medicaid, increase corporate accountability, and confront forces that seek to take away critical services. HCAN believes in creating jobs, not cutting programs people depend on. HCAN runs comprehensive issue campaigns that mobilize people at the grassroots and define the public debate. HCAN is fighting to protect, implement, and improve the new health care law through national and state-based legislative and regulatory campaigns built on grassroots action, public education, communications, policy analysis, and groundbreaking research. HCAN has become a respected voice and national leader on health care while continuing to focus on aggressive field activity. Support HCAN, Healthcare for America Now.
You're listening to Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Thank you wherever you're checking us out. We Act Radio, SoFlo Radio, or maybe on the podcast or
like
subscribing.
Talking over each other. Not talking left.
Yeah.
We kept going to the break.
Yes, we did. But, that was a real scandal. It is a real scandal. It's something that Americans are going to be.
It's a real debate.
Yes.
It's an issue. It's a problem.
Right.
Scandal, I think. Probably.
I only use the word scandal because of the right's insistence to focus on non-scandals.
Scandal indicates that somebody absolutely without a doubt did something wrong, and it's scandalous. It's possible. It's likely.
Yeah. But while most of us continue to have debates like what you just heard Shane and I have, and debate where we think these lines should be drawn, Congress is still spending most of its time focused on irrelevant things like, is the White House behind the IRS scandal? And this week, Congressman Elijah Cummings released the full transcript of the 5-hour hearing that Congress held with the IRS manager.
I've heard that a lot of this was a 5-hour deposition. Okay, very different than a hearing. It wasn't in public. This was behind closed door. Kind of, you may have seen them on movies. A lot of Grisham movies have this, where the person who's doing the questioning sits on one side. There's a stenographer on the other side of the table. Is the person. They may have the representation there. It's question back and forth, just to get information. Not a hearing.
Okay. However, that transcript prove what Elijah Cummings and many other people have said all along, that the White House was not behind this scandal. But it doesn't matter. Darrell Issa is not going to back down. He certainly didn't say, okay, you were right. He said he was disappointed that Cummings released the transcript because he has already gotten what he wanted. He has already put the idea out there, and I guarantee you that Fox viewers and many other Americans still believe that the White House is behind the so-called targeting of Tea Party 501c3, 501c4 groups.
Right. I think we make a mistake. I think it's important where someone has made an allegation that is false and provably false to bring the evidence forward and prove them false and to vindicate those who have been falsely accused. But in our media world, in our political world, this isn't a court of law. This is a court of public opinion. And making the accusation and making it strongly, making it repeatedly, even if it's without any evidence whatsoever, is almost as good as getting a conviction, because the public starts. First of all, nearly half the public wants to believe it because they dislike this president.
And who loves the IRS?
Right. So it's easy. So, to say, well, Darrell Issa has failed because he can't prove that it was attached to the White House. Well, yeah, he has failed in that. But if you poll the public, chances are a good plurality of them believe that allegation.
Right.
And that is as good as a conviction when it comes to the political world.
Just like they believe that there was a cover-up in Benghazi, and they believe that Eric Holder, was personally trying to arrest James Rosen.
And if you think about this, for the first 4 years during President Obama's first term, the Republicans were successful in blocking so much of Obama's policy. Now, he got through a lot as well. But even though he suffered defeat after defeat after defeat legislatively, his personal popularity stayed very high.
Yes.
Couldn't be touched. We may not like Obamacare because we don't know anything about it. We forget that part. But we really still like that guy, Barack Obama. We think he's a good guy. We're rooting for him, and we're going to vote for him again. So what they did this time around and said, let's chip away at that. Personal popularity, because what he does have at this point, he does have the bully pulpit. Let's weaken the bully pulpit.
Right. They know that they can pass legislation or block legislation all day long because they have the power of the House and they have the filibuster in the Senate. So they have been successful in blocking legislation, passing their own bills, avoiding trying to do anything to fix the economy, and they can keep doing that. But that has only made Congress's approval sink. And Obama's has stayed the same. All he has left is his ability to go out and appeal to the people. And so they want to weaken that position, to make the people dislike him, because that's all they have left.
Improving it doesn't weaken his position. Just putting it out there and saying it over and over again can do that. Can.
Exactly. So. They know if they get him dirty, he doesn't even have the bully pulpit. That's all he has. So if they can pin these so-called scandals to President Obama, that's all they need. Their job is done. And I don't know how we combat that. I don't know how we convince people who believe it despite all the evidence.
When it comes right down to it, his popularity has not gone down that much.
No, it was still like 48% this week.
But we'd like it in the mid to upper 50s.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But
in terms of getting something moving and going and having a successful campaign on, think about it. The Congress is not going to pass anything even if 90% of the people like it. Think about it. So.
They've proven that.
Yeah.
Time and time again. Yes. So anyhow, it's great news that Elijah Cummings released these transcripts. We have to start figuring out a way to undo the damage that Darrell Issa has caused, because the truth isn't going to...
Good policy is good politics. Just keep putting out good pieces of legislation, good ideas, and let that stuff wash away. Jumping up and down.
How do you do that when none of your ideas, none of your policy will get passed?
You just keep putting it out there and bring it up and let them vote it down. Let them vote it down. Let them vote down the background checks, because you know what? You let them vote down the background checks, and what are they talking about? Bringing it back. And because there's been some political repercussions.
Yes.
Just keep putting the good policies out there, the good ideas. Keep asking the American people for their support, and just keep voting on it and voting on it and voting on it. If they want to go have their little witch hunts, let them. You can't stop that. But just good policy will always trump, I believe.
I hope you're right. I see the logic in it. I sincerely hope.
What else are you going to do? You're going to constantly be in a defensive crouch saying, no, I didn't, no, I didn't, no, I didn't?
I don't know.
So, and that's why the midterm elections are gigantic.
Yes.
Gerrymandering be damned. We got to get 3 million more votes out there.
Yeah. We have to make it unable to steal, essentially. We have to, what was that wonderful phrase we heard during the last election? We have to get higher than the margin of theft.
Exactly.
Yes, that's what we need for the next election. Anyhow, we are running slightly behind today because of our heated debate there.
Or we're ahead.
That's a good way of looking at it, Shado. We're going to be back with more here on Talking Left, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Whoa! awesome! Totally awesome! All right!
It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
It's been nearly 50 years since poverty in America was a front-burner issue on our nation's political agenda, and it's time to move it up again. Even as those at the top of our society have grown fabulously richer in the past decade, those in the economic middle have seen incomes stagnate and fall, opportunities decline, and poverty become not about someone else, but about them. Numbers that were not even imaginable half a century ago are now our cold reality. 50 million poor people, 51 million more who are near poor, almost 1 in 4 children under 5 years old living in poverty, and no sign of this mass decline decelerating. The face of American poverty, however, has changed somewhat. In the 60s, the poor had largely been born into it and were out of most people's sight, tucked away in backwater rural counties and isolated urban ghettos. This kind of poverty persists, but today's big jump in numbers comes from families that have been knocked down from a middle-class life, dismayed to find themselves among the long-term unemployed, grabbing at temporary low-paying jobs and buying meager groceries with food stamps. These are the new poor, but they also constitute a new demographic phenomenon, the suburban poor. Once the secure base of the middle class, suburbs have become the fastest-growing home of American poverty. Since 2000, the number of suburban poor has surged by 64%, twice the rate of urban poor. By 2011, America's suburbs held 3 million more poor people than were in our core cities. This is Jim Hightower saying American poverty is no longer about them, but us. To learn more about it in your area, check out a new Brookings Institution study called Confronting Suburban Poverty in America at www.brookings.edu.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. The battles for higher wages and union rights being waged around the country by fast food workers, retail workers, Walmart warehouse workers, and port workers is part of a dynamic new low-wage worker movement in America. From New York City to St. Louis, from Milwaukee to Chicago to Detroit, and to L.A. and beyond, workers assisted by unions like SEIU, Unite Here, and UFCW are standing up for higher wages and the right to form unions. Martine Raffanon is with the St. Louis Workers Organizing Committee in the St. Louis Can't Survive on 735 campaign.
There are 36,000 fast food jobs in St. Louis. That's one part of the low-wage worker spectrum. We've got home care workers. We've got workers in retail. These workers need to change the context of these jobs, make them strong middle-class jobs. That's our work. That's our goal. This movement resonates so broadly across our community in terms of both workers and those who stand with workers in St. Louis and then across the nation. These workers are leading the charge, but this is a fight for all of us. There's a coalition of unions that are working to support this effort in Missouri, in St. Louis, and also we have a tremendous infrastructure for support of these workers through Missouri Jobs with Justice.
For the second time this month, Turkish labor unions have called a general strike to protest the harsh police actions against protesters in Istanbul's Taksim Square. 5 trade union confederations began a one-day nationwide strike Monday and are also calling on workers to take to the streets to protest government actions. During the last general strike in the first week of June, this unidentified Turkish protester told Canada's Radio Labour that economic injustice for workers, as Turkey's economy expands, is helping drive these protests.
So this is sort of like a 99% issue. The growth of the economy is creating more inequality in earnings and is therefore antagonizing the people.
Construction has come to a halt in the Canadian province of Quebec. Jesse Russell reports.
With contract negotiations between the Construction Association and unions who represent the workers falling apart this weekend, the construction workers walked off the job Monday morning. The strike impacts business, residential, industrial, and municipal construction. The association is seeking more authority when it comes to requiring employees to work on Saturdays, and they also want to create a 14-hour workday. Employers are also seeking to pay less for overtime. Currently, workers receive double time, but the employers want to only pay time and a half. More than 175,000 construction workers are walking the picket lines. Both sides have accused the other of bargaining in bad faith. This is the first construction strike in the province in 30 years.
The Workers Independent News is brought to you with support from the Bank of Labor, a division of Brotherhood Bank and Trust, member FDIC, equal opportunity lender. Bank of Labor is union-owned, union-represented, and the bank of choice for unions and their members. Now you can do business with a bank that shares labor values. More info online at bankoflabor.com.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Hey, Dad, how do you throw a curveball? How do you build a fort? How do refrigerators run? How do fish learn how to swim?
Kids ask a lot of questions.
How high can you jump?
But you don't have to know every answer.
How many phone numbers are there?
Because you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent.
How do cell phones work?
There are thousands of children in foster care who don't need every question answered.
What's electricity?
They just need you.
What's the moon made of?
For more information on how you can adopt, go to adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
You're listening to Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano, live from your nation's capital.
Unless you're listening in another country.
Yes, that's true. I don't know if we have any listeners.
What are you doing in Riyadh?
I don't know if we have any listeners in other countries, but thank you wherever you're checking us out.
Well, there's been a couple emails we've gotten about our RSS feed because people have been going overseas.
That's true.
So
good point.
Hello.
Well, if you are new to the show, we occasionally like to do a segment we call Trust Busters. We have set up a website for this. We will eventually someday get it all populated, but
we have lots of stuff to put there.
We have lots of stuff
just for this week alone.
Yes. You can check out the Facebook page at facebook.com/trustbusters, and you can follow along on Twitter at BustTheTrusts. And this week, it seemed like some of our agencies, the FTC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, were of that same mindset. Bust the trusts.
Big time.
Yes.
Doing their job.
It was like one right after the
butt.
next.
Yeah.
In big news, the SEC, the chairwoman, Mary Jo White, is going to take a hard look at letting banks just settle for their crimes. Essentially, there is an SEC policy called the no admit, no deny settlement.
And this is not just a SEC policy. This is the way court cases usually get settled.
Yes.
That when there's a settlement, you're going to be paying the plaintiff who's been harmed by your product. You admit no liability whatsoever. And that's part of what you're paying for, the fact that not everyone out there can then use your admission against you and then sue the crud out of you.
Right. We saw this in such a large scale after the 2008 financial meltdown, where so many of these banks were found guilty of, risky credit default swaps, of the home mortgage scandals, and robo-signings.
The thing is, we wish they were found guilty.
Good point.
They never got there.
Good point.
They avoided getting there, and they wanted to avoid getting there.
Excellent point.
They paid off.
Yes. And nobody went to jail for crashing our economy. Nobody even had to say they were sorry.
No one even had to say we did something wrong.
Right. Despite the fact that many of us knew quite well what they did wrong and the disaster that it caused.
And having to pay $50 billion probably indicates you may have done something wrong.
Yeah, but you know what? Having to pay $50 billion doesn't mean much when the taxpayers just bailed you out for $700 billion.
Oh, and far more when it comes to Fed policy.
Right.
Trillions.
Right.
Trillions.
So I $50 billion, I don't really care.
It's a cost of doing business.
Exactly. And it's a cost that we're paying for.
And it's a write-off, by the way.
Right. Exactly. So the the SEC chairwoman, Mary Jo White, is taking a second look at this. She's going to change the policy that allows the banksters to say they didn't to pay without admitting any wrongdoing. Now, this is not going to apply to every case. She said it will, quote, depend on how much harm has been done to investors and how egregious the fraud. Realize the taxpayers are investors in many of these banks, especially after the TARP bailout and what have you. And this appears to be a direct response to Senator Elizabeth Warren questioning this policy, saying why it was allowed to continue and why the SEC pursues settlements instead of prosecution. At the same time, unrelated.
But this is really important because people who are against changing this policy say, well, then they won't settle. And that's probably true.
Yeah.
But the thing is then that does get to the goal that Elizabeth Warren is talking about. And what we, the people, are looking for is a trial. Put them on trial. Don't settle. You know, if they have to admit liability and they say, well, we're not going to settle, then fine. Prosecute them.
Yep.
Let's go.
Exactly.
Giddy up. It's about time.
Yeah. Break them up.
Because obviously these settlements are not doing any good. It's not deterring them in any way, shape, or form.
No.
They are bringing back the same practices.
No.
They're doing it
completely.
again and again, saying it didn't cost that much before. We didn't have to admit we were wrong. We didn't go to jail. We had to write a small
where's
check.
the risk?
Where's the risk? There is no risk whatsoever.
They're perfectly fine hinging our entire economy on risk so that they can hedge their bets and make more money. But any risk to them, themselves, any real risk to them personally.
There isn't any.
Exactly.
This may put some risk back.
In addition to the SEC having that great new position, and hopefully it goes even farther, hopefully prosecution is preferred to settlements eventually, the FTC has also announced a new sweeping investigation of patent trolls.
Yes.
This is a really interesting case because many people may not be familiar with the practice, the use of patent trolls. They are companies that are actually called, where are they? Patent assertion entities, which is such a nonsense fluff term. Patent assertion entities are companies that essentially have no real business. They just buy up huge
extortion
packets.
Organizations.
Yes. They buy up huge packets of technology patents and use them to sue companies.
Or just threaten to sue.
Right.
And get payments.
To get payments. One example of a company that did this, a patent troll tried to sue all companies that used a document scanner hooked up to a computer to scan and email a document. Like, that's how ridiculous these patent trolls are.
Yeah, another one that Sam Cedar has been talking about a lot, along with the Electronic Frontier Foundation, is the patent for podcast.
Right.
Serialized audio production. Meaning what we do here, somebody claims a patent on it.
Right.
But they, since we don't make anything, there's no reason for them to sue us. But for people who actually do it as a livelihood, and they don't make a lot of money, they're trying to extort money out of them. For creating an audio file that people can download that increases by date.
Right. And they're just some of these most ridiculously vague patents. Apple is a big offender in this.
Oh, let's look at Siri.
Yeah. Is a big offender in this by using patent troll companies to essentially sue anybody who has any product remotely similar to something they patented 10 years ago before they ever developed it.
Which was just a kind of a vague idea. Like
exactly.
It was like a twinkle in their eye.
And
maybe we should have a conception rule in terms of patents.
Yes. When is the exact moment of conception?
Yeah. Really? There actually is.
Does the patent begin at conception?
Well,
yes.
More than just a maybe we can do this someday, because that's what they're patenting.
Right.
In addition, an idea.
In addition to the FTC doing this, Shane, you were in the court for a ruling on an FTC, another
the Supreme
FTC
Court
case.
Actually ruled, believe it or not, in favor of the FTC.
Holy cow.
The FTC wants to go after pharmaceutical companies, big pharmaceutical companies who have patents on a drug, and then other companies want to put out the generic version of the drug to compete with them. And when they start suing each other, what they do is they settle. And the one with the patent says, well, we'll pay you $10 million a year or something like that for 9 years, and you don't bring your generic to the market, and we'll kind of share in the monopoly profits. So it hurts competition. The companies, make a whole ton of money. And it just hurts the whole.
It certainly hurts consumers.
They're calling it a monopolistic practice, and the lower courts have said no, you can't do that because there's a patent there, and they're allowed to be monopolists. The Supreme Court said, nah, you might have a case here. Let's hear this one. So they didn't rule that it in favor necessarily that the FTC is correct, but they did say FTC, you can go forward.
Right.
You can prosecute this case. Let's get the evidence. Let's put it on trial.
And this is big news considering the current Supreme Court we have, because normally they find in favor of business.
Well, then the normal big business guys, Roberts, Alito, they've said that they shouldn't go forward.
Right. So
There
something
was just
to
enough
watch.
of them.
Yeah, something to watch as we go forward. We'll give you an example of just one of these cases of what happens when companies get too large and the SEC and the FTC aren't giving enough oversight. So we are going to run to a break, and we'll be right back with that example. You're listening to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano, so stick around.
What is this? What's going on?
It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
It's our last errand today, Jimmy. Just need to pick up some light bulbs.
Whoa, there's so many. Did Grandma tell you which ones to buy?
No, but check out the label on this package. It'll help us find the right bulbs.
Does it really matter?
Well, sure. The new light bulbs use a lot less energy, so we save money on our electric bill by using an energy-saving incandescent, CFL, or LED.
How about this bulb?
Let's see. We need to replace the 60-watt bulbs in our bedside lamps. That one is 800 lumens, so it should do the trick.
I've never heard of lumens.
Lumens tell us how bright the light is. The more lumens, the brighter the bulb.
You know, Grandpa, you're a pretty bright guy.
Yeah, you're pretty smart yourself, Jimmy.
Lumens, the new way to shop for light. Learn more at EnergySavers.gov. That's EnergySavers.gov. A message from the U.S. Department of Energy.
You may be hearing about people having trouble making mortgage payments and risking losing their homes. Many of them just aren't aware of the options that can prevent foreclosure. There are many options available to homeowners, such as repayment and forbearance plans, loan modifications, and even refinancing. Where does someone go for help? They should talk directly with their lender or a qualified HUD-approved counseling agency. Both can provide helpful information without charging a fee. According to PMI Mortgage Insurance Company, it's not a good idea to pay for services that you can get for free from a lender or a qualified nonprofit counseling agency. To learn more, visit homesafepmi.com or call HUD at 1-800-569-4287 for a counseling agency near you. That's 1-800-569-4287. This message is brought to you by PMI, supporting sustainable home ownership that strengthens communities.
Take Action News with David Schuster, Saturdays from 12 to 3 on We Act Radio, 1480 AM and weactradio.com.
Well, for me, it's always been, you report the facts. You report like hell, let the chips fall where they may. And the truth ultimately is what's going to sort of help our society and help all of us. I don't think progressives want a thumb on the scale on the facts. They just want the facts out there. You let the facts out, and progressives will tell you, we're going to win 70% of the time. You may quibble with the percentages or whatnot, but I think that's just sort of what progressives are looking for, and I think that's where this all sort of meshes with my interest as a journalist. And my interest as a journalist is report the facts. Here's what's going on. Here's what the facts say. Here's what history says. Here are the lessons we know we have learned. And let people draw their own conclusions. And I think what's so unfortunate right now in the world of broadcast media is I do think that a lot of conservative radio, certainly conservative television, they're not interested in facts. And that's ultimately where I think conservative media is going to have its downfalls, that Americans are hungry. They're just hungry for basic information, hungry for basic facts. You report like hell. You let the chips fall where they may. I think it's natural for all of us who care, who are passionate about politics, who feel like we have a sense about the difference between right and wrong. I think it's okay to let that be part of your coverage. It's important for all of us as broadcasters and journalists. In this day and age, we have to be authentic. You can't be the person who's up in the ivory tower that comes down and tells people, now you must eat your peas. No, it's all about, we all have personalities, and I think it's being aware sometimes of our own bias, but also being open to the idea that sometimes we're wrong, but we have a dialogue, and we have a passionate dialogue, and we care about this country, we care about this community, and I think that sort of passion is what carries us through.
Hear more from David Schuster, Saturdays from 12 to 3 on Take Action News, on We Act Radio, 1480 AM, and weactradio.com.
You're listening to Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Poor Shano's got too many buttons over there to deal with. Running the video, the audio, recording, and trying to provide me as, co-host material here. Poor Shano.
I'm fine. I hit the intro music button instead of the liner button. That's all.
You're bumping ahead.
And actually, the funny thing is that I was going to fix it right after this, but now that we're talked about it, I can't fix it. For the podcast version,
yes,
so
it's okay.
If you have no idea what we're talking about, that means I fixed it. If you know what I'm talking about, then you heard it and I didn't fix it.
Well, we take the breaks out of the podcast anyway. We were just talking about, some agencies, the FTC, the SEC, finally getting some regulation in place to put a handle on big business and big banks. This is, I think, great news. I think this is one of the biggest problems in our country is the power of corporations, whether it be the power of them on our elections, the power of them in our banking system, our education system, our healthcare system. It's an overarching theme. And the SEC's policy change on big banks, I think, is probably my favorite one, just because of the damage that the big banks and Wall Street and the banksters created in our country. And without fail, the same time we're hearing about the SEC making these new rules, 6 former employees of Bank of America are alleging that the company has done way more evil stuff than we even thought about. They have a policy twice a month to deny any application more than 60 days old. They sit on documents, say they never received them, and make
these are people who have applied to renegotiate their mortgages.
Yes.
Essentially, what they're doing is they're making it very difficult. They'd rather foreclose.
Right.
So they're lying.
That's exactly what they're doing.
They are lying.
And these are sworn affidavits by employees, including that employees who put 10 or more homes into foreclosure a month got a $500 bonus. I mean, this in and of itself shows you, we don't have time to get into it in this segment, that the bank has more financial incentive to foreclose on homes than to keep people in their homes. This is a problem.
And it's contrary to law, and they should be prosecuted for it, penalized for it, and not simply be able to write a check and say we didn't do anything wrong.
Exactly. So hopefully this is one of the first banks that is hit with the inability to use a no deny, no admit settlement and actually have to admit to some wrongdoings. I think our country would be better off to see the banksters start having to answer for their crimes. We're going to come right back with Nicole Flato of Think Progress Justice, and she's going to tell us all about how the Supreme Court took on big business and supported big business. We'll be right back.